Part of it is just because fear is just such a fundamental human thing, right? It's the result of evolution and biology. We need it to survive. It's incredibly important in that context, and I think also very primal.
What was your personal journey getting into this world of media, and what were maybe some of the fears that were present for you as you transitioned into it?
For me, how I learned about the world was through stories, right? Whether that's like books or movies. Like when Time Magazine or Newsweek came, read it, cover to cover within a day or two, right? So I was always very attracted to stories. I always naturally really enjoyed writing. I had, my first blog, in middle school. It got me into a little bit of trouble in high school, actually. But, you know, uh, apparently teachers and principals only read the headline.
Alex started off his career in finance, but then transitioned to working in editorial for both one of the fastest growing media upstarts in the US, as well as one of the largest, prior to that. And so he has a wide variety of experience working in different editorial environments. How would you characterize the relationship between the media as an institution and fear?
Part of it is just because fear is just such a fundamental human thing, right? It's the result of evolution and biology. We need it to survive. It's incredibly important in that context, and I think also very primal. The media's job is to get your attention, and so being able to leverage that side of our humanness turns out it's incredibly effective, right?
What can we expect then of the media, given that that's what the dynamic is?
Most likely, within a couple of election cycles, the media landscape is going to be completely transformed, right? The reality is, uh, it's hard to change people's behaviors, but behaviors are often, I would say, like generational, right? And so a lot of these legacy medias, they have sort of legacy consumers. A lot of these politicians, are getting to, an age, right? And so we are going to see a new generation of media and political leaders, as well as consumers with very different behaviors. And you know, I think for media in general, that's a huge opportunity, right? Because you know, fear for humans, that it's a survival instinct, right? And for the media, it's as you mentioned, it's also a survival instinct right now. The issue with fear, right? It's kind of like if you sort of succumb to it, then it kind of owns you, right? But if you manage it, it can be actually very rewarding and constructive. And the same applies to the media, right? Like if you rely on sensationalizing things and instilling this sort of fear without the story to back it up or without the payoff, that is going to long term undermine the trust that the trust that your readers or consumers have in you over time, right?
It hasn't dissuaded people being media from still going that route. Probably because they're still fearful. They're not able to get to the other side and harnessing fear for creativity and taking the survivalist energy and putting it towards innovation. Do you agree with that characterization, first of all? And then how do you make sense of that?
I mean, I think it's totally correct. They've sort of been on this path. The problem is that when you leverage this kind of strategy, you have to keep like up leveling, right? Humans are super adaptable. And now we've gotten to this point where it's like, you have, let's say, two sides, and for both sides, everything is always existential, right? And the problem with that is after a while, people are just going to tune out, you know? It's you can only cry wolf or tell people the sky is falling so many times.
What exactly is happening? What is the dynamic in your view? And what is it that makes it so complicated as a consumer to be able to withstand these tactics?
These people are really good at their job, right? Like they know what works. And there are formulas that just really work, right?
How do we move away from that? How do we find our own agency within this dynamic?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I feel like our generation, like let's say like the millennials and Gen Z, in a lot of ways, that's already happened. I mean, when I worked at the big media company, right there, there's they have the cable portion. I worked on the website. Um, and so the cable portion of it, the demographics were already like very old. Like people in our generation that they don't watch cable news.
And in your view, like, is there a place for that? Is there a place for somewhat of a values driven top down approach? And
100%, 100%. But the implementation has to be very simple and smart, right? As an example, like you shouldn't be able to say like super hateful, racist type stuff, right? On a platform. Like there should be consequences for that. Um, but then like where sort of do you draw the line, right? Because then if you start employing this web of rules that starts to look like, like the tax rules of America, you know, then we start to have issues, right? And so like you need some like baseline values to adhere to, and you need common sense around those baseline values. Um, you just don't want the bureaucracy of those values to get too large, because that's when things start to get muddled, and that's when maybe like corporate interests start to take over, and then you get again unintended consequences, right?
what are some of the specific actions that people can take or the questions that they can ask themselves to kind of get going in that process?
Well, I would say the easiest way to do it is to start finding people that you trust, and um don't give that trust easily. Like that trust has to be developed over time as well, right? Just like any of your relationships. I think that's step one, right? um I think step two is sort of what the whole purpose of education in college was always for, which is like start practicing your ability to have independent thought, and critical thinking, because I think these days it's so easy to take positions based on maybe what's trendy or what's going to give you some social benefits, or maybe you heard someone say something smart and so now you can repeat that and feel smart.